Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Graduate Student Seminar, Fall 2021, organized by the Department of English and Humanities. Every term, from summer actually, we started this seminar program with our students, where all our graduate students are invited, and of course the teachers, they nominate, and according to that we ask our students to present. So this is a wonderful opportunity for our graduate students to share their work. So today we have three graduate students, Marzukul Haq, Abi Shah, and Christie Omgliana, who will be presenting their papers. Before we start the presentations, can I request the head of the Department of English and Humanities, Ms. Arifa Ghani Rahman, to say a few words about the graduate seminar.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for organizing this. And thank you to all the student participants, speakers, for agreeing to do this. And of course, to the faculty members who have nominated them. So since the last semester, we started this student seminar, as Nadia was saying. And quite a lot of times, the idea actually came from the fact that when we faculty members talk and, about the students and things like that, we often hear about these wonderful papers that have been presented or that have been written for a particular class. And it seems such a shame that we did not have access to those, or that we could not listen to those or read those papers. So I thought that, this might be a way to not only showcase the work that you have done, the excellent work that you've done in your courses, but also as a way to encourage others to bring their work forward and share it with others, like yourselves, other graduate students, other undergraduate students, because at the end of the, and at the end of your, studentship, you do an internship or a dissertation, and you present that in a formal thesis presentation ceremony, or a program. But this graduate seminar is for other students who are writing all these papers during their coursework. So I think that I hope that it will encourage you to really do your best to work and produce work that is commendable, that is, that you can use also as a way to showcase your research skills, your analytical skills, and your presentation skills. So I hope that, we can carry this on, and other students will be encouraged to participate. And I hope that we will be able to listen to more and more wonderful papers as we go on. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, sir, for coming and joining this, and to all my colleagues here who have joined this program. Thank you for being here and supporting our students. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you so much, madam. Can I now request Professor Kaiser sir, Professor Kaiser Hamidullah sir, to say a few words to our students?
Well, I think you should start the program. There's no point in wasting time on more words. All I have to say is that it's very encouraging that the department has taken this initiative, and I congratulate the students who have been nominated to speak today. I hope it will encourage you to focus more sharply on your research, and inspire you to explore new areas which interest you. So there are people who are interested in learning more about culture, literature, and the interconnections between peoples through literature and culture. And there are lots of areas which have not yet been explored, and I hope you will sort of try to think outside the box and enter new areas to explore. So good luck, everyone. And, thanks to the department and the organizers. Okay. I think, Nadia, you should just
Yeah.
start the program.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Professor Kaiser Hawk, sir. As I mentioned earlier, so we have 3 students from our graduate program who will be presenting today. So 2 students are from our Literature and Cultural Studies track and 1 from Applied Linguistics and TESOL. So first of all, I would like to invite Marzukul Haq, our final term student from Literature and Cultural Studies. He's going to present Afghanistan in Bollywood films. So Marzuk, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Give me a moment. Let me just get the presentation. So I hope my slide is visible. Hello?
Yes, it's coming.
Yep.
Yes, it's coming. Marzuk, go ahead.
Yes, it's visible.
Is it visible? All right. So, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Marjugul Haq. I'm going to talk about Afghanistan as it has been represented in Bollywood films. This is actually the topic that I came up with for the Afghan colloquium, which took place last term. And I'm now pursuing this topic as my dissertation. And in this, in my work, I essentially trace Orientalism as it is found in Bollywood films representing Afghanistan. And I have selected 8 films. 8 films, 2 of them are pre-9/11 films, and the rest are after 9/11. So, for example, I've picked Dharmatma and Kudagawa, which came out in 1975 and 1992. These are pre-9/11, and then Escape from Taliban, Kabul Express in the 9/11 decade, and then after the 9/11 decade came the historical dramas like Padmavat and Panipat Kesari, and then in 2020 Dorbas. So I would just like to begin with Dharmatma and Kudagawa, and I'm going to propose that Bollywood films have really presented Afghans as barbarians, essentially. They have vilified Afghans as much as they could. We can see this in Dharmatma and Kudagawa, for example. In Dharmatma, we find that the villain, or not really villain, let's say rival. The rival is an Afghan guy named Jangura who fights the Indian hero when he perceives him as a rival in his love. And the Afghan person, for instance, is presented as a very violent person. He does not listen to reason. He ill-treats women. He's forceful towards women, and this is one of the images here actually show his forcefulness towards the heroine here. And of course, needless to say, it's the Indian hero who wins the heroine here, who wins the Afghan heroine. The other film here, Kudagawa, shows one of the images shows an Afghan villain, and the other image shows both the Afghan heroine and the Afghan hero attacking, holding the Afghan villain. So what happens is that this film is actually set in Afghanistan, and both the hero, the heroine, and even the villains are shown as very brutal people. When Badsha Khan, the hero, asks Benazir, the girl he falls in love with, for his hand in marriage, Benazir tells him that you have to avenge my father, otherwise I cannot marry you. and Badsha has to sort of avenge Benazir's father by going to India, and Badsha kills him in a very brutal fashion. They both grab his arms on horseback, and then they smash against a rock. So as brutal as you can think, and the brutalities don't really end anywhere. And in the post in the post 9/11 decade, we find two more films coming out, Kabul Express and Escape from Taliban. And Afghan people are really vilified. Afghan guy in Janbas, and they go to Afghanistan as a wife. And there's a great deal of domestic violence in this film, where Janbaz grabs her by the hair, slaps her, and when Shushmita finds out that Janbaz has a wife, Janbaz tells her that, this is how it is. You're going to be in the same room with her. It doesn't really matter. You have to comply. You have no choice. And even Shushmita's brother-in-laws, they beat her up. For example, in the top right image, you can see one of his brother-in-laws strangling her. So there are very overt images of domestic violence. In Kabul Express, which came up in 2006, we find other, even more orientalized images. For instance, what happens is that two journalists go to Afghanistan to take pictures of Taliban, but while they're contacting people to get pictures, they get kidnapped, they get taken away, they get taken by the Mujahideen, and when they get taken by the Mujahideen, they are blindfolded. And in other instances, we find them riding literally a tank, in the film. And there's this funny incident in this film. One of the Taliban actually get them hostage, get these two journalists. He's the best cricketer. One of the journalists contradicts him that no, Shahid Afridi is not the best cricketer of all time. It's Kapil Dev. He surpassed Shahid Afridi. But the Taliban, because he has the gun in his hand, he forces him to say that no, it's Shahid Afridi. But later on, in this image, for example, one of the journalists get the gun, and he forces the Taliban to say no, say that it's Kapil Dev, and he has to yes, and he has to say like yes, it's Kapil Dev, even though he doesn't want to. So I'm going to move on to the historical dramas. These are these films came out in the decade after the 9/11 decade. These are Padmavati, Panipat, and Kesari, and these films have been very, very successful very, very successful. Two of these films have made huge profits. And in these films, what we find is that Afghan kings are constantly vilified. They're constantly shown as barbarians, whereas the Indian kings, for instance, are shown as, very, very angelic personalities. For example, in Padmavat, we find that Alauddin Khilji, so after he invades a region called Chittor, he makes the princess stand in a pool of water while she's chained to while she's chained to this pool of water holding two torches, and he sort of throws pearls at her just for fun. And then in another instance, after he has killed his own uncle for the throne, he sticks his head on a staff and then shows it around, and he has no regards for how we find a similar thing. This is not exactly about Afghan king, but what happens is that the Sikh regime. This is the story about the Sikh regime who gets attacked by that this Afghan person is dragging a woman, and they're about to kill her because but one of the Sikh regime members, Havildar Ishar Singh, actually saves this woman by fighting this group of Afghans and spectacularly saving her. And what we find is that constantly the Islam is invoked in the actions of these Afghans. For example, when they're about to kill the woman, they're saying Surah Fatiha, or whenever they're about to fight the Sikh regime, they're giving out prayers. And there has been all sorts of efforts to vilify in the Afghans in this film. In the film Panipat, for instance, this is about the Afghan ruler Abdali. So Abdali is again shown as a very violent person. He kills his own courtier. In the bottom right corner, you see him killing his courtier with a knife because his courtier gave him advice that he did not like. And in other instances, he quickly loses his temper and threatens people with knives, as we can see in the top right image. I would like to move on to the final film, Torbaz, which is sort of set in contemporary times, which is about child suicide bombers. So this ex-army doctor goes to Afghanistan to start a cricket training camp, and he sort of tries to get them into cricket and convince some of the child suicide bombers who happen to be a part of the NGO he's working for, and he convinces them sort of not to become child suicide bombers. Who are these child suicide bombers are purportedly in the film working for the Taliban. And I would like to also briefly talk about Hollywood, how Hollywood orientalizes Afghanistan. So I studied 3 or 4 Hollywood films for this as well. These are Iron Man, Red Sand, and 12 Strong. These are more recent films. And one of the differences between Hollywood and Bollywood films is that in their orientalization is that but the Bollywood films have brought up historical dramas. They've brought up a savior complex. The Hollywood films, on the other hand, do not really refer to history. They're usually set in the present day, and the expression war on terror gets thrown around a lot. And compared to the Bollywood films, there is much more overt gun violence and bomb explosions in Hollywood films. And so these sort of constitute some of the basic differences that I've found between the two films, as far as they've orientalized Afghanistan. So with that, I would like to is a place where there has been a lot of energy reserves have been found, and India's imperialistic ambitions actually lead them to reason would be Muslims in India actually helps them win the election. Afghanistan has been orientalized. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marzouk, for your presentation. So we will now move on to our next presenter, who is Abi Shah, again a final term student from Applied Linguistics and TESOL. So he's going to talk about Metro's development and empirical value. So Abi Shah, over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, is my screen visible and am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So a very good morning, everyone. I hope you all are doing great. So I'm Abir Shaha from the Master's Program of Applied Linguistics and TESOL branch. So first of all, I would like to convey my salam to our very own respected teachers, the presenters and the participants who are there here. And thank you so much for giving me the floor. I'm very much honored and privileged to present through this graduate program seminar. So to begin with, in the last semester, summer 2021, I did a course named Materials Development and Evaluation under the wonderful facilitation of our very own Ghulam Qadir Zilani sir, ENG 540. And today I'll be sharing some of my observations and learning outcomes from that particular course. So as you can see my screen, my presentation title is Materials Development and the Empirical Value. So let's begin. So to begin with, I would like to refer to a particular quotation quoted by Charles Zenning, who very firmly proclaims that if learning material is designed to be highly relevant and delivered in context, then it is likely to be useful, which is very true. So moving forward, I would like to address the most significant aspect of today's presentation. I mean, what is a material? So in my sense, a material can be anything and everything that carries some sort of pedagogical value. So in other way around, a material is a content or a set of content pedagogically sound to like sustain or conduct a effective and sustainable teaching learning bipartite process. So again, it also can be put it like any from the perspective of SLA or second language acquisition, that anything which can be used to facilitate the learning of language is a material, quoted by Tomlinson 2016. So a material can be of any shape, any texture, and particularly of any fashion. For example, the printed, non-printed materials, the audio visuals, the books, journal articles, and so on. However, one size fits for all, or does one size fit for all? I mean, this particular sentence can work like a very rhetorical question, and at the same time as a very philosophical chunk that one size fits for all. So you see, in the very like academic or pedagogic arena, so we have a tendency to speculate, to infer about things, especially about the materials, that a particular material will fit for all the students, but which often is not a very true notion because of some several interrelated factors, some variables, which are like the individual learning differences, the very needs, lacks, and necessities of the students, the very cognitive barrier of the students, like every students have their own needs, lacks, and one size fits for all doesn't necessarily work in the arena of material or material development. So moving forward, about some of the very generic traits of materials. So it is highly expected that a material should be, or an ideal material should be informative, instructional, experiential, eliciting, and exploratory. So about the first one, informative. It basically, or it should be like informing the target learner about the target language, about the instructional, this very mode or trait of the material. It kind of guides or instructs the target learner about the target language of the use. Experiential, it again motivates or encourages the learners about the experience of the target language in use. And about the eliciting one, it encourages the learners directly to use the language. And about the exploratory trait, it encourages the learners to make discoveries out of the target language. Now, material development. So material development, in my sense, can be put it like a very empirical approach involving the production, the evaluation, and the inspection of the materials. So the material development process, it simultaneously aids the language acquisition and the development. However, it also can be put it like the very planning process, like by which the teacher creates the units or lessons to carry out the goals and objectives of a particular course. However, there are some interrelated or associating factors, in the arena of materials development. For example, the effective teaching learning decorum, the classroom ethics or policies, the teaching technique and principle, the teachability index, and lastly, the learnability of the learners. So I'll be talking about some of the variables. For example, the teaching technique. So you see, every teacher has got some unique set of skills, and to make the learners understand any content, he or she kind of instill a very unique set of drill or technique. For example, like what I do in my class is I kind of instill a very potential leading. Whenever I enter to a class, so which can be regarded as a teaching technique. And about the teaching principle, I can name one, that is the 80-20 principle, and that provides a very interactive setting to a classroom decorum, in which the teacher interacts with the students using the 20% of the time, and the students will have the 80% of the time like involving themselves in some sort of activities and effectively implementing a material. However, teachability index, the teachability index, it basically comprises of two interrelated portions, that is the willingness to learn and the willingness to change. So very mathematically or statistically speaking, the both variables of willingness to learn and change are converted into percentage to make a like statistical input. And lastly, the learnability of the learners. It is the ability to learn more efficiently and effectively. So there should be some sort of synergy between the teachability and the learnability of the learners. And again, there is a kind of hypothesis that says that talks about the learnability of the learners, that in a classroom setting, if the students are very psycholinguistically aligned or up for a material or a lecture, then the material or the lecture will be very much successful. However, again, it can be put it like that a material development process comprises of the selection, adaptation, and creation of the learning materials. So as I have already mentioned, that every teacher has got some unique set of skills, and to implement a material, he or she will obviously require some sort of activities. For example, it can be a group work, pair work, any listening tasks, and so on. However, there are certain questions or queries are to be considered before developing materials. For example, what's the across age level of the target learners? Like, who am I talking to? Who am I teaching to? The children, the teenagers, adults, or the professionals? What skills are to be addressed, like the listening, reading, writing, or speaking? And most significantly, what soft skills are to be addressed? For example, if I am aiming for the listening skill, the soft skills could be the listening for gist, listening for details, deducing meaning from the context. And if I am aiming for the reading skill, like there could be soft skills, right? Skimming, scanning, also reading for gist, reading for details, paraphrasing. And about the writing one, paraphrasing, editing, proofreading, etc., could be very good, effective soft skills to be addressed. And what's the across proficiency level of the target learner? So if my learner is in the very beginner, intermediate, or in advanced level, I also need to be considered that. And lastly, what contents are going to be used. So in this particular slide, I have tried to put some of the very significant aims and objectives of 2012 NCTB. So as you can see that to help develop learners' creativity, imagination, and inquisitiveness by arousing their inherent talent and potential, to firmly induce in learners human qualities such as moral values, honesty, perseverance, tolerance, discipline, self-confidence, good manners, respect for others, aesthetic perception, civic relationship, and sense of justice. Thirdly, to help learners grow up as a potential citizens, inducing in them patriotism, nationalism, and democratic values in the light of great language movement, the spirit of liberation, and finally, secularism. Fourthly, to give learners a firm and well-founded knowledge about Bangladesh, its history, tradition, and culture. And finally, to develop among learners a feeling of fraternity, a sense of respect for human beings, irrespective of gender, race, claim, language, culture, or occupation. So you see all the aims and objectives are targeted to a particular curriculum, and I believe that all the materials should reflect the aims and objectives sustainably. So now about the sociological value of materials, we also need to determine some of the very, like sociological markers. For example, the images of women, like who is represented well or who is underrepresented, like the gender equality is shown or not. About the stereotyping factor, like certain perspectives, the physical appearance, the superstitious beliefs are promoted or not. Again, confronting a stereotype, like if a material is promoting knowledge, to break a particular stereotype or a chain of stereotypes and challenging them or not. Finally, women's representation through false generics. For example, like word choices, some particular word choices that may make women feel inferior. And we can, like fill the very gap to neutralize the equation, for example, using chairperson instead of chairman or humanity instead of mankind. So again, there are some sociological markers to consider, as you can see in my screen, like whole human beings with the strengths and weaknesses of human. An attempt should be made to break job stereotypes for males and females, and it should be implied that certain jobs are incompatible with women's femininity and men's masculinity, and women should not be identified by their physical appearance. So here I have included some of the illustrations from the English for Today book of grade 9 and 10. And throughout the whole course in the last semester, I very carefully analyzed the whole book, and I have figured out that there are almost approximately 160 illustrations out there in the English for Today book of grade 9, 10. And in those illustrations, you see, like, it's a very regret to say that there are no such implications of our indigenous community, Like there are no portrayal of the indigenous community of Garo, Chakma, either Marma or Murong. And again, in some of the portrayals or illustrations, only the men are, like tend to see the doing the physical labors, and women are doing the household chores. But yes, here is a portrayal that shows that women and men are cooking together. And that's a very good sign of material. So yes, materials and use of illustration. So illustration, it kind of beautifies a material, and it helps to the learners to understand the context. And materials is of 5 types, like decorational, representational, organizational, interpretational, and transformational. So the decorational one is it only just decorates the page or a particular content. It has nothing or less to do with the very subject matter. Representational, it mirrors the course content. Organizational, it provides a very organizational framework to the course content to make the learners understand about the subject matter. Interpretational, it also like helps the learners to make understand about some difficult contents. And transformational, it provides some cues, like cues or drills. For example, the mnemonic memory drill for the learners to recall any of the prior knowledge or experience. And here you can see that I have provided a pie chart, and it is from one of my assignments of the last semester. And it is from the English for Today book of grade 9 and 10. And in the assignment, I had made a mathematical percentage of the illustration used. And you can see that the representational illustration has got a very higher age, that is 55%. And the transformational and decorational has got a very lower age, and 2 and 4%. So about some of the very general checklist for developing materials. So you see, like for example, there shouldn't be any gaps between the materials and its users. And if there is any sort of gaps, there should be supplementary materials to fill out the gaps. And any material should be able to address the needs, lacks, and necessities of the learners. And most importantly, the material should be novel enough and culturally familiar enough. And it should also, like facilitate the technological implications. So lastly, about some of the issues in materials development, like grading and sequencing. So we need to, like grade and sequence the material to make the learners understand. For example, we can also like follow the Bloom's taxonomy to very thoughtfully curate or sequence the material from lower to higher complexity rate. So we need to do a very thorough need analysis of the target learners. So we sometimes need to adapt and adopt the materials, and we need to ensure the authenticity of the material. And we also need to like consider the technological implications of the material. So lastly, what I wish to address is the interrelationship between the teacher and the material developer. So in my sense, each and every teacher is either directly or indirectly, either in disguise, is a material developer who recurrently, like complements, supplements, subtracts, grades, sequences a material. So now I would like to, like show my final material that I had prepared in last semester. The title of the material is Recalling the Classroom Days, and the skills I targeted is listening for gist, deducing meaning from the context, and listening for details. And the type of materials are conversation, poems, images, and video material. So the theme is basically on the pandemic, the COVID-19. So here I have like put a poem that I personally wrote, lots of logics, aligning with the pandemic fact. So thank you so much. I mean, that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. That was a very good presentation, very well organized, and I can see the uh, marked development as a student, as a graduate student, because I've seen you in your undergrad years. So very good to see you. Excellent.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Keep me in your prayers, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abhishek, for your presentation. So we will now move on to our third presenter of the graduate student seminar. So at last we have Christie Omgliana, a student from Literature and Cultural Studies track. She will be talking about her reading of transnational literature.
Oh, my microphone. Thank you so much for giving me the floor, Nadia ma'am. I will be talking about transnational literature, as ma'am said. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, distinguished faculties from ULAB, students, and other guests who've joined. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Kaiser Hoxer for nominating me to speak in this platform. I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity. I would share my screen. Give me a moment. So I will be talking about how we can build global contemporary consciousness, the issues that we have in our contemporary world, for instance, climate change and refugee crisis, the migrant crisis, how transnational literature...
Excuse me, Christy, did you share your screen?
Oh, I'm trying to share it. I'm trying to share it. Yes, ma'am.
It's not visible yet. Yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am. It's right here. Is it visible now?
Yes, it is. It's coming.
Thank you.
Please put it on the slideshow.
Yes. Right. So as I was saying, I'm going to talk about how we can build global consciousness through transnational literature. The novels that we've read in this course has helped me develop a sense of global consciousness, topics which I was not aware about before, but I should have been aware about as a young person. This course has helped me gain insights into those topics. So moving on, just the first things first, I'll be quick with this. What is transnational literature and why is it important? So I made a little note over here. So in his journal article, Professor Kaiser Hoxer has written, it's titled Many Histories. It was published in 2018. So there he had written how he started composing poems at the age of 16. But as he was a young boy writing in the English language, it was not something which was readily accepted by society at large, because there were not many people writing in the English language back then. But as we can see, and often, as Sir wrote, I made this little note here, there was an unquestioned certainty that poetry could be written only in one's mother tongue. And of course, Michael Madhusudhan Dutta was invoked as an object lesson. Well, that did not stop Kaiser Hoxer from pursuing his passion. He continued quoting the English muse, he continued composing poems in English. And at the end of the day, however, as he writes in his journal article, he sometimes stumbled upon a certain thought. Where did he particularly stand? Where did he particularly stand in the cultural space, if not geographically? in the cultural space as a young person composing poems in the English language. So that is where my point is. That's where transnational literature steps in. We have a cluster of poets, authors, novelists, and people who are writing in a language which is not their mother tongue, but they're writing it so passionately. They're covering all the topics, all the contemporary topics in it so brilliantly. That's where transnational literature is there. And it is pretty much still a new field. More and more authors are coming in. And I'd also like to mention why transnational literature is so important in today's era. And I was very glad that I was nominated to speak on this particular cause. Well, as you see that in today's era, we have an unprecedented scale of human movement. People are moving, whether within the borders, outside the borders. People are always moving due to climate change, political turmoil, and many other reasons have forced people to move in between locations. And as we move, cultures move. We have societal interactions like ever before. Climate change has forced millions to move into other places. And that's how there's an interaction between cultures. And these interactions are greatly highlighted in texts of transnational literature. So as you would see that, I'll go on to the next slide right now. Yeah, we have seen a trend of waning traditions. The traditional relationship that authors used to share with their language, with their culture, has declined, has waned over time, for the best, of course. So as I was talking about the movement within and beyond boundaries, it has waned traditional connections between authors, languages, and cultures. At the same time, as much as it has helped us point out our differences with other cultures, it has also helped us to locate the possible connections that we have between the cultures. And if we can do something good, if something good comes out from it. So that's transnational literature all about. And the novels that we have read in this course, we've covered in this course are, yes, the text covered. We did Khaled Hosseini's The Kite Runner, which is mostly on the Afghan refugees, the Afghan diaspora. And it's a great starting point. It's written in very easy English. It's a great starting point for someone who wants to explore transnational literature. Going on to The Gun Island, we have The Gun Island by Amitav Ghosh. He's an Indian author. And this text also greatly highlights how there is a very heavy number of people migrating from South Asia to European countries in search of a better life. Now, moving on to Naipaul's A Bend in the River. This is also a very interesting work by Nobel laureate V.S. Naipaul. And we see how colonization changes lives in a remote village in Africa. Going on to, in other words, by Jhumpa Lahiri, as you all know, Jhumpa Lahiri is someone who is originally Indian. She's from Calcutta, but she has continued writing in English, and now she writes in the Italian language. So this is, again, a very, very wonderful book. If you want to explore transnational literature, this is your starting point. I will not talk about the summaries. I think that's going to be a bit boring. I will move on quickly to the topics, that have, as I was saying, that have helped me gain a greater understanding, a deeper understanding of our contemporary issues. I'll start with climate change because nothing can be more serious than climate change. A quick little data. Numbers are always something very boring, but still a little quick data. I think that's important. In a recent tally by the UN, it showed that around 50 lakh people die each year or are greatly affected by climate change. And that is double the number affected by coronavirus. So the question remains within us. If such a great number of people are affected by climate change every year, then why haven't we tackled climate change just the way we are tackling COVID now? Why haven't we come up with actions, with the certain spontaneity that we see people are tackling COVID with, the pandemic with? Why hasn't climate change been tackled in the same way? And I think this is a question that's been going around in a lot. I've heard that in a BBC interview some years back. A climate activist from Indonesia had asked the same question, that why isn't climate change being tackled urgently? I'll go on to the next points in my slide, where I say I've written about the Bhola cyclone and Bangladesh struggle for liberation. Well, we all know less or more about our glorious history of Bangladesh liberation, how a war of 9 months had led to our emancipation, what were the reasons. But never in my entire life, since I've started reading about the history of our country, I'd imagined that a natural disaster could be one of the pivotal reasons that led to the sense of revolution in my countrymen. So that's something I read in Amitabh Ghosh's book, Gun Island, as I was saying. So in the Gun Island, Amitabh Ghosh has particularly pointed out that the Bhola cyclone, which is still termed as one of the worst disasters of the 20th century, had a deadly effect on this part of our land, because there was no Bangladesh then on the East Pakistan side, and there was property damages. Thousands had died, and probably the numbers calculated are, I mean, the numbers that we have on data, I mean, the information that we have, the loss was a lot more than that. Now let's see how it is connected with Bangladesh struggle for liberation. Ghosh points out over there that the natural disaster, it was there. Let's just talk about it as a natural disaster. But the authorities who were there in West Pakistan had a very lackadaisical approach to all the damages that the natural disaster, the Bhola cyclone, had caused in the 1970s, in November 1970, to be in particular. So they did not send in the aid, the necessary help that was required to rehabilitate people. And as a result, masses had a sense of revolution brewing within them. They wanted a change in authority. They were deeply unsatisfied, and they wanted to overthrow the government. And that is how, from a sense of helplessness, from their lackadaisical approach towards us, the authorities in West Pakistan, we had a sense that we want an independent country. That's not the kind of authority, that's not the kind of government we want. So you see how climate change, how the Bhola cyclone and everything is related to our country's history as well. This side I was never aware of, but due to this course, I've been enlightened on it. And then again, let's talk about floods, how floods have become a regular phenomenon. Every other day you open the newspaper and you'll stumble across a flood. Just last year, I think, I have some friends in Philippines, and they told me that they could not get out of their homes for weeks because their roads were inundated. And then think about the flash floods in West Germany. We know that floods are something of our side, I mean, of Asia, of Southeast Asia. But then flash floods, when it attacked Germany, it really shook the world. And there was lots of property damage. But although their government acted properly, but still, floods are becoming common throughout the world. We're learning about them every other day. And then something very interesting, snake sightings in California and Chopra University. This is also something that Amitabh Ghosh talks about in his book. Do you all remember the last time, just a few days back, I think last week, there was a 12-feet python that was spotted, recovered in Chattogram University campus? Okay. Yeah, there was a 12-feet python that was spotted in Chattogram University campus. It was eventually recovered by the students and then set into the wildlife. But as much as it had shocked people, Dhaka dwellers and people from other parts of the country, did not shock the Chattogram University students. Do you know why? Because in Chattogram University, there's a saying that it is a hub of snakes. And in a study published in 2015, they said that at least 36 species of snakes inhabit the area, which was not very common probably 30 years back, but it is becoming increasingly common every day. Now, some of these snakes, as you may know, are venomous and some are not. So thankfully, some are not. But this phenomena is also something that is common in California. I've learned this in Ghosh's book again, where he says that yellow-bellied snakes, I mean, it's called, they're yellow-bellied snakes. These venomous creatures, they're washing up on the shores of California every year. Now, this is something that has started happening recently. And he describes it as an effect called the El Nino. Then again, we have global warming and climate change. The ocean's waters have humidified over the years, and an increase in temperature has forced the creatures who used to live deep into the sea waters to come up to the shores. And now they're up to the shores and inhabiting the public spaces. And so people are shocked seeing them. So you see how deep sea creatures and creatures in the wild are now coming up to public spaces. Well, as I was talking about the study published by Chopra University Zoology Department students, they said that in 2015, the study published in 2015, they said that due to an increase of aquaculture, because people were cultivating shrimps and other fishes in the local areas, forcing the snakes which inhabit those areas for millions of years to come up to the public spaces. So these are some of the things, and wildfires and origins and the causes. Ghosh also details that what is the cause of the wildfires. You've heard about the wildfires in Greece, you've heard about the California wildfires, which has killed people, which has damaged properties. Well, he also talks about the origins of these wildfires. I'll not go deeper into that. It's something to do with the insects eating up and humidifying of the forests and then causing catastrophic fires. Well, my whole point was that all these issues about how climate change is related to our country's history, how climate change and floods are becoming a regular phenomena, and the common things that we have in California and in Chopra University, all of these connections that we have, even though miles apart, transnational literature has helped me have a deeper understanding on them. I did not know about them. So when I enrolled for this course, I wasn't expecting that I'd learn so much. I hope I'm not taking too much time. Okay. All right. I'll quickly finish the slide. Migration and refugee crisis, as you know, is an overarching problem in our times. In Husseini's book, in Khalid Husseini's book, The Kite Runner, he talks about the Afghan diaspora. He talks about life in exile. We learn how millions of Afghan people who were doctors, who were engineers, who were highly educated professors, were forced to seek refuge in a foreign country when they were invaded due to the changing political climate of Afghanistan. But now they're forced to maybe run a cart by the street. And this is something in common. Then again, this is something in common that I found. I visited the Rohingya camp 2 years ago, before the pandemic hit us. And there I found that there were people who were teachers, there were graduates, there were graduates from zoology, graduates from chemistry, who were actually there in those dilapidated, crammed refugee camps over there. So there must have been something terrible back in their country that has forced them to flee. Then I'd like to talk quickly about Bangladeshi migrants. I have a little data over here. Then again, I made this note. Yes. So we have a local tally published this year, obviously. A local tally says that Bangladeshis are at the top of people from various nationalities who have crossed the Mediterranean Sea or land borders to reach European countries without valid documents. So as you see, we're on the top of the pyramid. We're right on top. So right on top, trying to reach European countries without valid documents. So these novels, particularly Ghosh's novel, talks about how there are characters. There are two characters who are Bangladeshi migrants who've settled in Italy. Now, surprisingly, they say that the foreign tourist who was spending thousands of dollars to taste Italian cuisine is actually cooked by Bangladeshi chefs or Bangladeshi people who were there doing a low-paid job. They think that, oh, I'm tasting Italian cuisine, but it's actually made by someone who sought refuge from a third world country over there. Surprising, right? But then they also say that it is because these are the kind of jobs that Europeans do not want to do anymore. So we have an opportunity for jobs there, but not the top-notch jobs, maybe the low-paying jobs, because Europeans do not want to do those jobs anymore. So I was enlightened about Bangladeshi migrants, Bangladeshi diaspora, people who have migrated from Bangladesh and have settled in European countries. What is their life like? And I found a connection in between the Afghan people who have settled in US and the Rohingyas, who were persecuted in Arakan and whom we have sheltered in our country. There's quite a lot of similarity, and these similarities were obviously pointed out because I enrolled for this course. So going on to, this is my last slide. I won't push it longer. Afghan crisis through the lens of cultural hegemony. Now, something when we were reading Khalid Hosseini's novel, The Kite Runner, I learned about this relationship equation that the Pashtun and the Hazaras share. As you all know, that the Pashtuns dominate their overall population and the Hazaras are a minority group. So what I found out is that the Pashtun-Hazara relationship is not an isolated one. In fact, it is the same relationship equation that the Myanmar Janta share with the Rohingya people, not accepting them as equal citizens. It is also the same relationship equation that the majority of Chinese people share with the Uyghur people. Why? Because we have heard claims of forced labor camps. We've heard that they're not taken as equal citizens. They're sometimes not granted all the rights that other Chinese people are given. And then we've also, this point came out back in August when they were digging graves and finding out remains of thousands of indigenous Canadian indigenous children, and how they were forced into residential schools. See how the indigenous people, even in Canada, were not accepted, and they wanted to change their culture. They wanted them to become like them. So this is not an isolated one. In fact, as I was talking about Khalid Hosseini's novel, so I found out that these relationship equations are not just in the Pashtun-Hazara relationship. In fact, all dominant cultures across the world find one way or the other to subjugate the minority groups. And I wouldn't be wrong if I'm talking about the Bangladeshi people, the Bengalis, how you've all heard about land grabbing and every other turmoil that you get to hear about in Chittagong Hill Tracts. So how much have we supported our indigenous people, our ethnic communities to flourish? I still know areas in Bandarbhan, in Chittagong Hill Tracts, where electricity has not reached, where there's not a school or a hospital. So what is I'm going to end my, I'm not going to end it here. Okay, just one more point. What is this whole point of development in Chittagong Hill Tracts? If you're just building resorts after resorts, hotels after hotels, but there's not a school or a hospital, what is that sort of development? We have to question ourselves. So I think young people like me should be taking up this course to enlighten, to broaden their horizon on these concepts. So it is incredibly important. As you see, as I was just telling you, you're going to walk miles after miles and find no primary school, no hospital. That's a part of Bangladesh. So why isn't the development happening over there? They're going to say that, yes, we are trying to push through development. How? By building a resort or by building a lavish hotel. And how many indigenous people have you employed over there to be in particular? They would have no answers. So these are some of the critical questions, sometimes debatable questions that have come across while we were talking about this course. And we also learned about Professor Kaisa Hoxer did not just stick to the novels. We also thought outside the box. We read many articles from The Economist. We were talking about articles from the Time, because this course was being taught just when the Taliban took over again from the US forces back in August 15. Yeah. So there we learned about a different perspective as well, where we've learned that how Afghan women, in the mainstream media, you always get to hear about Afghan women who are media personalities, actors or actresses, or footballers, for instance, who were given refuge in the States just a few days back. But what about the rural Afghan women? Now, that's a different perspective. Are they in support of the Taliban? Well, surprisingly, yes, they're in support of the Taliban. So we were actually discussing all these critical topics from various journals and recent media articles. So it was a very, very insightful course. I came across many things that I did not know about before. I had a changed perspective within me as well. So that's how transnational literature has helped develop a sense of global consciousness within me. And if students who are here, if you are wanting to enroll in this course, I'm sure it will be greatly beneficial for you, because you're going to become an empowered person, an enlightened person, and at the same time, a very, very politically conscious person. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Christie Omgliana, for your presentation on transnational literature. So we have come to the end of the student presentations, but the floor is open for questions, comments. Students, faculty, all of you are requested to ask questions. If you want, just switch on your audio and please ask a question or make a comment. So we have Professor Shamshad Murtaza, Dean of School of Arts and Humanities, and also the Pro Vice Chancellor of ULAB, who has joined us. Thank you so much, sir, for joining. The floor is open. Do we have any questions? With questions and comments, I would request Shamshad sir to say something. But first of all, questions and comments from the audience.
A brief comment, perhaps. Christie, I loved your presentation. Marzouk, I enjoyed yours too. And Abir, you were very thorough. Every time I listen to a detailed presentation on applied linguistics, I become more and more convinced that I have not learned the English language. Pardon the joke, but it was a very detailed presentation of the subject. Well done. Christie, I mean, I'm glad that you have continued to think about the problems which we discussed in relation to the course, and that it seems that you are, you have new ideas which have, which were inspired by the course, and I hope you will continue to work in this area and do more research. And I think you have a background in NGO work also. Am I right? So yeah, so that gives you a unique perspective on these issues. So your professional work with the NGOs, your work as a writer, because you're also working for an online publication, I think. So all these things, I think make you an ideal person to continue researching these themes. You see? So good luck to you, Marzouk. You bring this up at the end. I wish you had provided a historical context at the beginning instead of just jumping into sort of summaries of the films, as it were. Because the history of the relationship between Afghanistan and India is fascinating. So you have Afghanistan and India interacting over centuries, then the British coming in, and then the British interaction with Afghanistan created certain stereotypes. Then the Americans, after 9/11, again took on those Orientalist stereotypes and carried on that Oriental enterprise. So I think the historical framing of the talk would have enriched it further. But since you are doing a dissertation on this, now you have the time to go into these aspects in detail, and structure your dissertation in a way that will highlight all the key issues involved. Okay, thank you for your talk. That's all from me.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you so much, Kazi sir. Yes. Any other questions, comments? Students, if you have any kind of questions for our presenters. So I think not. I think everyone is just
It was
in. Yes, Rupak?
no question, ma'am, but it was wonderful to listen. I learned a lot of things.
Yes. So we have undergraduate students here too. So I'm sure it was a learning curve for you, that how you can actually talk about your topic and present in front of an audience. So if we do not have further questions or comments, can I request Professor Shamshad Murtuza, Vice Chancellor of ULAB and Dean of School of Arts and Humanities, to give his remarks.
All right, thank you, Nadia. And I'm so sorry that I had another interview going on actually. So we were recruiting someone, so I missed the session. But I'm so glad that I caught the tail end of Christie's presentation, and it struck a raw nerve in me because I did my second master's in American Indian Studies, and so I went to Arizona, and that's a long story, but the asymmetrical power arrangement between the fourth nation, the indigenous people, and the mainstream. So it's a hugely contentious issue. And it has become even more so for us, given the Rohingya diaspora at home. And the government seems to have no plan whatsoever in dealing with this huge population, culturally. So whether they're going to keep them segregated at Bhashanchar, Cox's Bazar, whether they're going to accommodate them culturally, whether they have any plan to acculturate them, whether they're planning to assimilate them or eventually amalgamate them. So these are the 5 stages of integration. So segregation, accommodation, acculturation, assimilation, and amalgamation. So when you talk about the tribal situation or the indigenous situation, so there is still this huge debate on the minority question. So Khudro Nrigoshti, so the politics of it, whether you give them the right of an indigenous population or not. So when you call them small ethnic group, so you're not giving them the land rights, you're not giving them the rights, that they're entitled as indigenous population. So the power arrangement, the asymmetrical power arrangement that I mentioned, so it's very important. And the same goes for the Uyghur population, so in China. And somehow, Kaisa sir would bear me out, so the Western discourse, it's setting the tone for everyone else. So you cannot separate the Israel-Palestine issue, from Uyghur, say the Han Dynasty or the, Mandarin Chinese issue. You cannot separate the Aboriginal population in North America and the federal government, from the way, so our government is dealing with our indigenous population. And everywhere you have the same idea that, so you need to have the one language, one unit kind of philosophy. So especially in an English department where we talk about plurality, inclusivity, so where we talk about, transnational culture and all that. And when you get exposed to reality, it's a different world. So you have one narrative going on in your textbook where you have a very ideal situation. Even if the ideal situation is not there, you can at least fantasize, you can at least conceive, imagine, an ideal situation. But the reality is totally different. So if you're working for an NGO, which I have just heard that, Christie, you have an NGO background. So from your textual reality, when you go to the contextual reality, so it's a different world. And this is a dilemma for any English graduate. How do we negotiate, these 2 different worlds, the fictive world and the real world? So in the English department, so within your 4-year undergrad programs and then 1-year MA program, so you're in a protected universe, but you need to get your hands dirty. You need to have, real political consciousness in which you get involved, you get engaged. And what we can do in the English department and that was one of the slogans that we had. We educate your imagination. We want you to free your consciousness. We want to decolonize your mind. We want you to be exposed to different worldviews, different settings, different contexts, lived through different characters. So you get exposed to lived experiences, imagined experiences, and through those exposures, you come to your own consciousness about certain things. And oftentimes we do not talk about the objectives of the English departments. So if you just think that English is an international language, we need to have that communication skills, you're missing the trick. And I urge my colleagues that when you engage your students in a classroom setting, please make sure that you share the objective of the English department. Otherwise you will be failing in your duty. So it's all about freeing their minds. So when we talk about that, you need soft skills like creative insights, critical engagement, critical insights. So these are not necessarily soft skills, these are essential skills. And I'm sure you have heard the jargon that we are going through fourth industrial revolution. So industrialization is over. Then we have the advent of information age. And now even the information age is morphing into something else. So we're going through another phase of social revolution, where the hierarchy is like traditional hierarchy is falling apart. For example, you can do a course on Google without going into any institution and get a job in the workplace. Right? So Amazon, Google will hire you without any school degree, any certificates whatsoever, if you simply complete their courses. And if you have the skill sets, you'll get a job. If you can communicate, if you can, run a program, do a program, build a program, if you're creative enough, innovative enough, you'll get a job. So that is challenging the age-old hegemony of, say, Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, and whatnot. Right? So our job in the English department, should be to discuss about these issues so that our students also learn how to break free from the traditional mindset. So I'm sorry that I'm just focusing on Christie's presentation and I missed Marjuk's presentation and Habib's one as well. But the main idea is that I thank the English department for organizing this discursive space. And it's very important that we keep having these dialogues, and instead of simply listening to us, like the professors, we listen to the budding scholars, budding thinkers, and we get activated and energized. So I'm sure because our young generation, so they are exposed to the real world in a whole new range of different ways that we are not aware of. So it's a learning experience for all of us. So thank you, Arifa, Nadia, Zaki, and others who were involved in organizing this program. And I'm so glad that I could join in even at the fag end of the program. And of course, I'm enriched by Kaisa sir's inputs as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shamshad sir, for joining us. We know that you're very busy, but thank you so much. Those were essential words that the students needed to hear. Thank you for your words. So we have come to the end of the Graduate Student Seminar Fall 2021. So we will be back again in spring 2022 with more graduate students. I'm sure this was again a wonderful experience for all the students who have joined from the graduate and the undergraduate level. Thank you to all my faculty members for joining us here for today. And of course, thank you, Kaisa sir, for being here. Your presence and your words always encourage our students. Thank you, Arifa madam, for always your guidance. That's all for today. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much. We will see you again in the next term.
A warm round of applause for all the participants.